break.
Wouldn't even be in spot. Back in my TV. Oh, we got nobody. Sweet. Call to order the City of Cannon Falls City Council meeting for Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. If I could get a roll call, please.
Gesme, he's absent. Grote.
Here.
Jepson.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Cronenberger.
Here.
Lindell.
Here.
Montgomery.
Here, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I ask for approval of the agenda, nobody has signed up for public input tonight, but we do have State Representative Pam Altendorf present, and she will give a presentation. So put that in the agenda. With that said, if I could get an approval. Motion from Lindell. Second from Diane. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. With no one signed up for public input, Representative Altendorf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So I'm Representative Pam Altendorf, and this was my first legislative session, so it was very busy January through May. I was able to come here last year, but during the session we were oftentimes there very late. If you're 50 miles or more from the state capitol, you get an apartment up in St. Paul. I'm at 48 and a half miles, so I regularly drive back and forth, and that would definitely extend my day. When we were getting off the floor at midnight, oftentimes I wasn't getting home till 1 o'clock. But I just want to let you know now that I'm out of session, I have been making my rounds and getting to all the city councils in the district, going to some of the school board meetings, and this really is my priority. And actually what I love is meeting people in the district, getting to know you and building those relationships so that as things come up in the future, you know that you can contact me. I will pass around my cards, and on here is my personal cell phone, and I just ask even to put it right into your cell phone and put my name and my cell phone. You don't have to text me tonight, but especially during session when it's super busy, it's nothing for me to be getting emails just like ding, 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 but I could be sitting on the floor and anyone in district that texts me and there's something important, I almost can see that right away and even walk off and give you a call or talk to you right away. So I just want to let you know that I'm available and I want to be a resource to everyone here in Cannon Falls. Just a little bit about my background. In my first session was my committees I served on was the Energy Committee, Education, and then also elections. So those are ones really you specialize. You could ask me almost any questions in those and I would be able to answer it to you. We also have researchers, so if there's something outside of that realm, I usually can find questions very, very quickly, but those are kind of the specialties where I put most of my time and energy. Just to give you a little bit of a review, and I know in the newspaper and the headlines, oftentimes you heard it stated that this was a historic session or a transformational session, and depending on where you stand, how you look at that might be very, very different. There was a record number of bills that were introduced, over 6,000 in fact. We have never seen this kind of amount of bills being pushed through. 75 new laws were signed. However, that number is actually very minuscule because with the omnibus bills, some of those bills out of the 75 have many, many bills attached inside of them, new laws that have been signed into law. We also started out the session with a historic surplus. It was $17.5 billion, which grew to $19 billion, which is completely unheard of in the state of Minnesota. I'm not even sure in the past if we've had a $1 billion surplus, to put that into perspective. And to enter this session with a $17.5 billion surplus, like I said, was completely unprecedented. At the end of the day, our taxes in the state of Minnesota were raised $10 billion. And as a fiscal conservative person, I would say I'm very, very concerned for the state of Minnesota with our budget growing from a $52 billion surplus. A budget, $52 billion. And our new budget is $72 billion. That is a 40% increase for the state of Minnesota. So, like I said, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a business owner. I'm a mom, just like many of you. I would look at wanting to run government a lot more like a business and not like it's just this open credit card. And that to me is very problematic. I'll talk a little bit more about why I see that being a problem. But if you can just quickly, you can research or Google, states like California a few years ago had a $24 billion surplus, which then when they they had a huge, it wasn't a $24 billion surplus. They had a huge surplus just like us, but then following it, because their spending grew just like us, they had a $24 billion deficit. And so that's what I am very worried about, is that we're heading down that path. Now, there were some good things that happened this session, and as many of you probably know, but we were able to get that bonding for the baseball park here in Cannon Falls money. So I was very happy. Bucky Lindo, Luke Winchell, some of the people from that committee, I had talked to them. And because they were so organized, they were able to get this to us right away. Early in the session, it might have even been January. So from day one, typically what happens, even though the Democrats are in charge and I'm a Republican, is they do try to prioritize one project in every district. And because they were so organized and had their project to me, from day one, I said the baseball field was our number one priority for our district, and I stood behind that the whole session and was just very happy that we could have that go through. Now, if you look at votes, I did vote against the bonding bill. And it's not because I voted against your project. It is because with a $17.5 billion surplus, I would have wanted to pay cash for the bonding. And I think it is fiscally irresponsible for the state of Minnesota to be borrowing money against the state, which we are now, being charged interest on that money. So it's not that I didn't support the project. It's that with again, this is such an unheard of surplus. We could have paid for all of our bonding projects by cash and not borrowed an extra dollar. And so that's why I voted against it, but also just know in the background, I was working hard to make sure it was in the project. There are some other good things that passed. I'm not sure what the city is working on, but there was some money for local tree planting with all the trees that have died. There's some good infrastructure projects. Obviously, we had a large problem this last year with potholes. And just to also tell you, I'm a business person. I understand borrowing money. I would never be someone that 100% would never want to do bonding or would not do bonding, but you also have to be wise with your money. And again, it just came down to a year with such a historic surplus. It was not, to me, a wise decision to be borrowing extra money. Another thing that I'm concerned about is our 2040 energy plan that passed. And although it sounds great on the outside, everyone, 2040, I think they call it clean energy. We started calling it the blackout bill. And the reason why is we do not have the infrastructure to go 2040 carbon-free energy. We do not have the infrastructure. In fact, I believe the Star Tribune even reported this. We do not have the infrastructure to get there. So we are part of a 15-state MISO grid. And we are not just using the electricity that's being produced here in Minnesota. We are having shared electricity from, coal, nuclear, natural gas, solar, wind from 15 states. We're a part of a grid. We're not an entity all by ourselves. Minnesota is not creating our own energy and using our own energy. So by 2040, when we close down the coal plants, when we close down the natural gas plants, all that's going to happen is we are going to be putting more pressure on the overall 15-state grid, because the state of Minnesota is not going to be able to produce the energy that we were producing before. And it's really actually very interesting. I'm kind of an energy geek now, but you can Google MISO, M-I-S-O. You can any day look at what we're using, and usually on a regular day, we might be producing only 2 or 3% solar. On good days, I've seen up to 20% wind on a good day for wind. But typically, even in the summer now, wind has only been at like 3 to 5%. So that worries me, because energy does affect every aspect of our economy. Okay, and just to finish, I wanted to state again why I'm worried is I want to look at the overall, you want to take the pulse of the state. You want to be making good decisions for the whole state. And the facts are, so, the one thing the IRS does is they like to tax us, right? So they also like to keep track of our income. And this is a provable fact. You can go to the IRS website, and in 2020, what we are seeing right now in the state of Minnesota is we are losing income earners. So people who are actually producing, who are working, who have good jobs, are leaving. Now, if you just look at the population, we have been pretty flat. So we are losing people, but we're actually losing income earners. It doesn't mean that our population is decreasing when I'm saying that. So both can be true. But according to 2020 statistics, because some people say, well, people are leaving Minnesota because of weather. Well, let's compare another state right next to us, and that would be Wisconsin. So in 2020, Wisconsin lost, and this is in adjusted gross income, 61.4 million in gross income. Any guesses what Minnesota lost? 1.56 billion. That's in our income. That's what the federal government is charging taxes on. And that is a very good indicator, because for the first time, especially after COVID, people can kind of shop around for states. We have a lot of people working at home, and people don't have to stay in Minnesota. And that's why, when you put your finger on the pulse of Minnesota, it is not very healthy right now, because we are passing laws that are not business friendly and that are chasing some of our highest income producers out of our state, and we're raising our taxes. So again, I want to let you know that we're working hard. But also, I want you to know my main priority of coming here tonight is Cannon Falls is a priority to me. I have been really, really trying to be a voice for common sense and fighting for small town Minnesota. Because even with the schools being on the education committee, there's a real discrepancy between what per pupil students are getting in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and what we're getting. And so, I just want to let you know that I am definitely trying to be a voice of reason and really, really trying to help small town Minnesota and concerned about the state and the health of all of us. Oh, and just a little advice for the Cannon Falls City Council is, even though I know you got funds, different funds that came in, when I've been talking to some of the other cities, is if they're using those funds, they're trying to use them in areas that's needed infrastructure, one-time spending. But I would try to advise very seriously not to be raising your budgets, because again, when we're looking at this 40% increase of the state budget, that doesn't look like that's going to be sustainable long-term. And so these are just facts. If we're losing our income producers and that's our tax base, that's a problem for our future. And so I just want you, as city council members, to know, even though it may have seemed like we had this huge influx of money, that as I'm talking to other cities, they're being very wise with their dollars, and they are putting them towards more one-time spending and things that need to be done, but not necessarily increasing their overall budget. So I don't know if it's typical to ask questions, otherwise I'll just pass these out. And again, please, I always lose these cards, so just go ahead and enter my cell phone right in your phone, and that way you have it, and if you ever need me, I'm a text away. You can just text me.
Are there any questions from the council?
I don't think so.
All right,
Thank you for having me.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the public hearing. We will open up Resolution 2689, certifying unpaid utility charges to be collected by taxes. So, public hearing is open. If anybody would like to speak about collecting the taxes. Second call for speaking in the public hearing, Resolution 2689. Third and final. Hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Council, look for approval to Resolution 2689, certifying unpaid utility charges to be collected by taxes.
So moved.
Motion by Diane,
Second.
second from Ryan. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. That moves us to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items may be adopted under one motion as presented or may be removed for discussion and resolution as council business. Item A, just and correct claims, the accounting period that ended on July 27th, 2023. B, meeting minutes for July 11th, 2023 city council meeting. Item C, approve the chamber event request. Item D, resolution 2690, approving conditional use permit for 31265 County 24 Boulevard. Is there anything the council would like to pull down?
I'll pull down A.
Just and correct claims, okay. That will become council business, item E. Anything else from the council? Hearing none, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion from Lisa, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Derek. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. That moves us on to council business. Item A, purchase agreement for Sandstone Ridge. Neil.
We have been working diligently with Endress Cannon Falls LLC. It's a pair of developers. They're sitting back here. They're sitting back in the back. Mark, their development manager, will be coming up, and I think Laura's going to get it set up. But we brought this to the Finance Committee, and Sandstone Ridge, everybody knows where Sandstone Ridge is. It's been kind of a thorn in Cannon Falls' side for, go on, 20, 25 years now. We have a pair of gentlemen here that are interested in purchasing it. We've been working diligently with them. They're going to provide you with a few slides here. Mark will probably be doing it, on what their plans are. I just want to go over the purchase agreement first to say, like we had in the past, the purchase will be for $1. One of the caveats that was brought forth in the Finance Committee was that they want a tax abatement on the property of $50,000 to remove all the old curbing out of the I would call it the north half of Sandstone and part of Sandstone Road, and I believe to take it all out. So when we did some math with our city engineer, it was determined it was approximately $50,000. Now, how does it would be a city-only tax abatement for 10 years. How does that work? We would abate the taxes. We got one abatement right now, actually two abatements that we're working on. It would be a city-only 10-year tax abatement for any new homes that are built up there. We would collect the city-only taxes, abate it back to the developer to cover the cost of the curb removal. Other than that, it would be at, of course, interest at the time of signing. It does collect interest as we go. So, Diane, you had something?
What, and 50,000 per year or
No,
50,000
total.
or 10,000? Okay, so only,
Total.
That's what I thought.
It's like saying, okay, we're going to do an abatement for $50,000. When we reach that number plus interest, we're done. Whether it's 2 years, 5 years, or the end is 10 years. Okay?
thank you.
And it's all based on the curb removal of the development. So I don't know if Mark wants to come on up. And he's got, I don't know, half a dozen slides that he'll talk to you about what they plan on doing up there.
Great.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Again, my name's Mark Sonsgaard. I'm representing the ownership group for the Enders property. With me this evening is Leon Enders and Andrew Enders, a couple of the from the owners group. So what I've got up on the screen right now is our concept plan, our rendering of what you'll be seeing soon for a preliminary plat application. And as Mr. Jensen mentioned, we have included the city old sandstone, or the old sandstone development that the city currently owns with this application. Going back to that slide, you can see how the Enders property is adjacent to the old sandstone development. So it made sense as you're looking at developing the Enders property to include development of, or redevelopment or remodeling or bringing it back from death, the old sandstone development. So this slide basically just kind of organizes the city property is the purchase agreement that we've been working on with city staff, and then the rest of that 47 acres is what is currently owned by the Enders property, or Enders group. With the development and with our agreement, and as we work through a preliminary plat application, this is kind of we're dialing in a little bit on the old sandstone development, or what's remaining of it. The red is where we plan to vacate and then also remove all those streets. And then the blue are the streets which have failed, which are development. We will be removing all those streets and then rebuilding. So the $50,000, we asked for some, in addition to the purchase of the property or taking the property and redeveloping it, we've also asked for some assistance in some of the demolition. And where we landed was, the city would help out with the curb removal. All the asphalt and class 5 removal we'll be doing ourselves with the development work. So this kind of shows just a good exhibit of, where that, all this needs to get demoed out and rebuilt. Just briefly, again, we'll be back here soon with our preliminary plat application, but Mr. Jensen asked that I just do a real high overview of what the development looks like. So the concept came in, and as we looked at this property, as you guys are aware, there's a lot of fat clays up here, and development is tricky. We've been spending a lot of time with soils engineers and our engineer on how to develop this, and ultimately this street layout basically puts the main street on the top ridge, and then all the building pads are sitting basically with very little grading, so we're not doing any big cuts or more specifically big fills on this development. So all our footings are designed to be on existing soils. So as we laid it out, it came about with a unique variety of homes as we worked this out, and that's one of the neat things about this development is that it is going to be a variety of homes in one neighborhood. I'm going to go around, I'll start with the smaller homes, that's area C. This is where the, park was supposed to be built, but it lays out better for a small villa neighborhood here. So this would be your empty nester, your retirement folks. And then from there, we got the B lots, which are 60 to 65 foot wide lots, would be your first time family lots. And then the A lots are the only thing that will remain from the original plat. We're going to just rebuild that street, and those 80-foot lots around that cul-de-sac would remain. And then the interesting lots are the D lots, which we're calling them bluff lots. Those are decided to go with larger lots there, 80 to 90-foot lots. And then again, due to the soil types, we laid out other site plans that put more homes in here, but we just couldn't get the grading to work. So these ended up with rather large backyards. So we came up with the concept of doing this rear alley. So not only do you have a 80 or 90-foot lot, you've got an alley running in the back where you can have your own accessory building back there for all the toys you like to have down here in Cannon Falls. And then down the hill and then along the county road, we've got some acreage down there. What we'd like to, are anticipating for estate lots with well and septic. This area is in the city limits, but to get water and sewer down here is extremely difficult. So what we'll be asking with the preliminary plat is that a couple of estate lots could be placed down there. And then back up in that F area, again, we're looking at a number of different type of life housing in here. So there's a nice spot right there for an apartment building. So that's what's planned there. And then we've got an active park planned, and then through the wooded area in the hills, we're looking at a passive park with a public trails through it. So that's a quick overview of the development. Phase one of the development will hope to get started this year and probably wrap up next year. But phase one does include most of the lots, or the lots that the city currently owns. The apartment would be coming soon, but the single family lots in the park is part of the early development plan. So just so you can see how that lays out in timing. And if that, I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, but we would appreciate your support on this purchase agreement. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the council on the purchase agreement? Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, I would take a motion to approve the purchase agreement for Sandstone Ridge.
So moved.
Motion from Diane,
I'll second.
second from Ryan. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Moves us on to item B, purchase agreement of Riverside Terrace. Neil.
Part of the 2023 reconstruction project, we had 3 areas that we needed to purchase for parcels. One of them that we had completed and one of them that was kind of delayed. We have now come to terms with the landowners, and we brought it to the finance committee. The purchase is for $50,000. Now we can proceed with putting in our stormwater pond, the river crossing, getting everything cleaned up down below, and we can do things right now. So what we're looking for is a approval for the purchase agreement. There may be a few minor tweaks that as we work through it. I know Shelley and Mr. Johnson have been talking actually today. If she's got anything to add, we'll, but otherwise it's $50,000 for them 2 parcels where the stormwater pond and the river crossing and sanitary sewer and water main, it's all going through there. So if you remember, our initial offer was a little bit under $40,000. So they came back at $50,000 as their final offer, and the finance committee said, okay, we're good. So now it's up to you guys to approve. Got anything, Shelley?
Just on the purchase agreement, we'd ask that this be subject to final review by the city attorney and city administrator. This is a form agreement. There's not a lot that we've changed here, but there's been some questions about what form of deed we obtain, and we'll just be looking at that in conjunction with the title work we've obtained to make sure the city's protected against my goal. Principally is any unknown, unforeseeable financial burdens that run with this land. So we're just going to make sure that that's all clean. We've got appropriate title work to protect the city, title commitment. And then being as this is, you guys know the history, the seller, Riverside Terrace, is an LLC. So there needs to be some documentation from them authorizing the sale. That does involve the uncle and the niece and the nephew who don't live here. And all three of them are going to have to sign off on that process. So we're just working hard to keep it front and center and get them signing off on everything. So those would be sort of those things that have to come back to us. It's not a change to the material terms of the deal.
Okay. Questions from the council? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to approve the purchase agreement with Riverside Terrace.
So moved.
Motion by Lundell,
I'll second it.
second by Jepson. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Moves us on to item C, Resolution 2691, denying development application for the Molnar property.
Mr. Mayor?
Is this open for comment or no? This is not.
No, Mr. Mayor. And in fact, that's where we'd start. City received a development application that sought preliminary plat approval and 2 variances for development of, it's a subdivision, if you will. And this went to the Planning Commission on, July 10th. And I've just had my eyes corrected, so I'm a little bit trying to figure out where I need to sit. So it did go to the Planning Commission, and with that went a memo that essentially is in the form of this resolution that's been brought before you tonight. The high-level issues with the proposal are that the subdivision is premature, primarily due to a lack of information that was provided by the applicant. As you know, city code subdivision requirements require a very detailed list of information, including utilities, public streets, things of that nature. Based on the information that we did have, we were not able to determine a lot of whether their submission complies with those requirements. But what we did find is that this is a premature subdivision in the sense that there is no provision for a public street. That's primarily the problem. They did seek variances. One of the variances they sought was from the subdivision requirement that all lots have frontage on a public street. They would prefer to rely on a private easement, which, if it exists, to the extent it exists, that's fine, but it does not, a private easement does not a road make, if you will. And there was no provision for paying for that, which is required under our city code. That was issue 1. And a variance to a subdivision requirement under state law, while it can be done, each individual city must provide a process and the standards for granting such variance, again, to a subdivision requirement in their code. We don't do that. So as a matter of law, the Planning Commission could not reasonably recommend approval to you based on that ground. The other variance they sought was from a really more of a zoning requirement, which is permissible if the city wanted to consider it. It was to allow changed the minimal acreage in the urban reserve zone. So that became sort of a less issue because when you're faced with a premature subdivision and an inability to grant the variances that the applicant sought, it became quite clear that the best recommendation was to deny the application. So that's what's before you in the resolution. Very detailed findings here to assert the correct legal standards, the city code provisions under which this is being analyzed under. So this would be a final decision from the council appealable in accordance with the city council or city code provisions.
Shelley, the denial that's before us is just for this application. This doesn't mean denial forever. They could come back to the table with a different plan that would follow city code. This is just for this single application.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and absolutely. There is a timing. They must wait, I think it's a period of 6 months before they can reapply in that. And there was some conversation, and I applaud the Planning Commission for trying to find some different avenues to help them. But the complete inability to address that street issue became the crux of the problem. And so they were stuck with a legal issue in addition to the prematurity of it.
Questions?
My only question, Mayor, sorry to interrupt. I always thought that the Planning Commission, Public Works Commission, Police Commission were advisory commissions to the City Council. I didn't realize their decisions were final before it ever got to you guys.
Discussion from the council. Any questions they might have for Shelley or about the issue?
I guess I have a question about like putting in a street, like how, like, what would be the process for any of that to put a street in where they're talking, like legally, like who pays for it? Who does the infrastructure?
Great questions, Councilmember Growth. And this also was discussed at the Planning Commission level, and our city engineer does have some good insights on that as well. Essentially, under city code, in terms of the subdivision requirements, the applicant has to make plans and demonstrate to the city the costs that they're going to cover the costs of the street. There's some alternatives in there, but ultimately, in this case, the cost would have fallen on the developer or the applicant.
Okay.
So that was piece one. In terms of the platting and how you create that, had there been a willingness to do that, we would have worked through the platting process with them so that a street could be platted and then eventually opened as a public right-of-way. To be distinguished between this private easement that the city as an owner of property has a right to use this easement to drive its vehicles to access, but that's not a public roadway, and that's a very clear distinction by city code.
Okay. Can you just have a house without, I mean, like I get it if you're out in the country, you know, you live on a gravel road. Like you don't have to have it tarred, you don't have to have certain things. But that far, I mean, can you do that close in town?
We did not get that far along to make that determination.
Okay. I mean, because that's technically within the proper city limits,
Right.
correct? Okay.
Right, and there are city code requirements, and we call them performance standards for public right-of-way. And one of the more concerning is having the proper width, not only just the pavement itself and whether it's gravel, bituminous, but having the proper width and the turnaround. I mean, you're serving a neighborhood now. When you subdivide property, it kicks in all of those requirements of how do you provide public services and all necessary public services to a new neighborhood, a more densely developed neighborhood. Even though this was only going to bring in a few more homes, it still fell within the subdivision requirements and then kicked in those street requirements. And to your point, whether gravel would have been permissible or not, again, we didn't get there because it still needed to be public in some form.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions or discussion from the council?
for sake of clarification, this is the recommendation is to deny.
That was
What would-
unanimous from the Public Works,
Planning Commission.
or Planning Commission, sorry.
Yes, just to respond to that, Councilmember Cronenberger, and I think the comment from the audience was a little, I think it was taken in comment versus what the code states, that the Planning Commission did make a recommendation. It was unanimous. It was after a long, lengthy discussion that is, there will be minutes, it is on the record. So they're recommending to you. Now, you as the governing body of the city can choose to follow that recommendation. That would be, as your legal counsel, also my recommendation, principally because of that variance, that if you granted that variance from the street requirement, that subdivision requirement, that's subject to legal challenge, and I do believe you'd have a very difficult time defending that. So that's just the legal side of it. The rest of the findings, I think, speak for themselves and support the, again, recommendation.
Anything else from the council? Hearing none, I would approve a motion to pass Resolution 2691 denying development of the application for the Molnar property.
I so move.
Motion from Diane. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Ryan. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. That moves us to item D, Towering Bluffs. Shelley, this is multi,
Is it possible I can just make a quick comment, or is that not possible? It would be very brief.
if you'd like to stay after, we could definitely talk, but public input time is done and the vote has been had.
I'm okay with this vote. I just want to try to figure out how I can sell property that the city just doesn't want me to sell. I'm just trying to figure that out
Sure, let's have that discussion after.
afterwards.
Yep. Yep. Shelley, Towering Bluffs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The third item that was before the Planning Commission is a package from Towering Bluffs. This had started late last year before the Planning Commission, and a recommendation to approve a preliminary plat for a residential, a preliminary plat and a rezoning from urban reserve to accommodate a residential development that will be done in phases. So they've moved forward with phase one, I believe is 12 lots, 11 lots, or 20 some lots. And so they need to obtain from the city not only the preliminary plat and final plat, they need a rezoning, and they also need a planned unit development because they've rezoned to the PUD zoning. So we need to overlay the planned unit development as well. So over the summer, we caught them up to the Planning Commission, the public hearing on the planned unit development stage of things. So that had completed all the necessary public hearings, both for the zoning, the plat, and the PUD. So those were complete as of July 10th. And then what was left then was to bring everything back to the council in final form with the Planning Commission's recommendation. So what you guys have before you tonight is, as Neil has set this up, the first introduction and first reading of, we need an ordinance to rezone to make sure that we get it into the recommended PUD zoning classification. So that's issue one. Then you need a resolution approving the preliminary plat and the final plat for the development. And then you need a resolution to approve the planned unit development. And within those approvals, I set it out like this for clarity purposes. In my mind, I think rezoning, because it requires an ordinance and that, you can do that by motion. You can adopt the ordinance in the first reading by motion. You don't need a resolution for the rezoning. That would be done, and then the second reading would come at the next meeting. I did separate the PUD from the plat, and I think that's the way we're going to move forward with some of these other new developments that you're going to be seeing over the next few months. Because in my view, a plat is really a very surface level that's subdividing the land itself, preparing for the eventual upward development of residential or apartments or what's going on there. And I think it makes sense to view the plat and the final plat with the development agreement, which has been circulated. It has been reviewed also by our city engineer. That will be entered into by both the city and the developer as a contractual arrangement. So I tied that to the plat. And then with the PUD process, there is a PUD agreement. It's kind of belt and suspenders in a lot of ways. It's also required by your code. But we wanted to make sure that everything was tied together. All the approvals are consistent. They're all conditioned on each other. So if tonight I've recommended a conditional approval of everything of the two resolutions so that, if something happens and the developer says, I'm not signing that agreement, either the PUD or the development agreement, that approval is conditioned on that. So, it's all tied together in a complete package. So if there's questions on how we did that or the development itself, some of the other requirements from engineering, we certainly can answer that.
Questions, comments? We'll start with the first reading.
Can I just have an overall question?
Absolutely.
And this kind of goes to all of these planned developments because they all include like dedicated parkland. Mm-hmm. And somewhere in there I read it, whatever these agreements are, kind of go with the land so that like if Jablonski, who's been doing this for a number of years, as we all know, if for some reason he only gets phase one done and then he can't finish it and somebody else takes it, the requirement for the park continues with whoever would be the next developer or whatever. Am I reading that right or not? Because I want to make sure I know the park district was, looking at the parks, that we don't lose our parks if it suddenly goes to 3 separate developers.
Yes. Councilmember Johnson, that's an excellent question, and you are correct. The purpose of the agreements is to record them against the property. And so the development agreement in this case will have the park dedication requirements, whether that's shown on the plat and things of that nature, supporting documents. So those will be there and recorded against the property and enforceable against current and future owners.
All right. Any other questions, comments? We'll do these one
Just
at a time.
one, the park board did approve this park dedication, so they're all on board. Actually, they approved all 3 of them on Monday, I believe it was. So
Great.
they looked them over. Thank you.
Okay. So introduction and first reading of ordinance 394, ordinance of the city of Cannon Falls, Minnesota to amend Cannon Falls zoning ordinance by amending a zoning district. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion from Jepson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Mr. Lundell. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Resolution 2692, approving Towering Bluffs Planned Unit Development Phase 1. Any questions? I would accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion from Diane. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Laura. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That also carries. Resolution 2693, granting final plat approval for Towering Bluffs First Edition.
So moved.
Motion from Lindell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Ryan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That also carries. That moves us to item E, which was pulled down, just and correct claims. Lisa, you pulled that down.
Yep. I just wanted to point out there was another, now I've buried it in here, another data request done that cost us $220, I think it was. Just pointing it out.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve our just and correct claims, the accounting period that ended on July 27th, 2023?
So moved.
Motion from Diane. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second from Lisa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That also carries. That gets us to reports. We will start with the Chamber of Commerce. Maggie.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just a couple quick updates from the Chamber. Last weekend, we wrapped up Crazy Days. We had a handful of businesses downtown participate in that, so that was fun to see. And we hope to make this an annual event. So if any businesses weren't able to participate this year, they can do so next year. Unfortunately, we had to cancel Fun Fest for our August event. We just didn't have enough vendors sign up. So that's actually wraps up the Fun Fest for this year. So we'll meet in the winter and set a good schedule for Fun Fest for 2024. This weekend, though, the car cruise is happening with the Cannon Cruisers. They are meeting at Artisan Plaza at 5. They'll have 2 food trucks out there, and then they leave at 7 for the cruise. The cruise route is posted on the police Facebook page and ours, but it is 4th Street, right on Mill Street, left on 2nd, right on 19. And then we are also going to have a couple food trucks now downtown at the old Lee Chevrolet lot, hoping then spectators can grab a bite to eat and then watch the cruise. Keep in mind, there's other events going on. There's, I think, Tillian's has Bargo, and then there's a meat raffle at the VFW. So all these events are going on this weekend in downtown Cannon Falls. So that's all I have for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Joint Powers Trail Board, they met on July 25th.
Yeah, it was brief. We did a Zoom and we submitted the grant request for fixing the trail.
Great.
Fingers
Great.
crossed.
The Park Board also met? Did not? That was canceled? The month of August is canceled, but July 25th they met? No, that's all right?
It was a special meeting on Monday, because we met and we talked about the 3 developments that we have and the park dedication. They approved all 3. One of them you just talked about tonight. The second one would be the Endress Timber Ridge, and then the third one would be Laura's and the EDA's Hardwood Estates. So, and that's all they had on there.
Great. Department heads, Jed, anything from Public Works?
Part of that park board meeting, they also approved the Deck the Falls fireworks.
Nice. Thinking about winter. Bill?
As alluded to, you will be seeing a lot of development applications in the next couple council meetings. The one construction project, actually we have a couple construction projects, but they haven't started. The big one being the first half of the 2023 street project, which is the lift station and the drilling the pipe under the river. Tentative time frame was mid-August, but the contractor's still waiting on some equipment delivery, so we don't have a firm date. But ideally, that'll start in the next couple weeks.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Zach?
I don't have any comments at this time.
All right. Laura?
We've got EDA this week, and we'll be kind of diving into Hardwood Estates. We do have that coming to Planning Commission on the 14th, so we'll kind of be just reviewing the phases and going over all that. Zach was too timid, I think, this council meeting. Next week, or next month, he'll be more
Then we'll
bold.
get him. Chief?
A couple of things, thank you, Mayor. First, Maggie already talked about the Cruisers event on Friday. There will be some traffic disruption along 4th Street and the other routes as they leave town. I don't think it'll be too big of an impact on residents, but just be aware, the route is on their Facebook page. It was in the Beacon, so it's well advertised as far as what streets are going to be impacted. The second thing, Council, so I received a email from the sheriff on Friday. This would have been after packets, an agenda were put together. He has requested assistance from the police departments within the county for the Goodhue County Fair. As you know, almost all of the agencies in the county have been, working to get their staffing levels back up. The sheriff's department is still in that process. And so they're finding themselves short of bodies for the fair event. Normally, they just handle it with their own staff, but they are unable to this year. However, if you recall, when we talked about contracted police services, we set the rates and stuff and the parameters of how we would do that for persons wishing to contract officers for events, for security purposes, that type of thing. We specifically excluded providing assistance to other agencies. If you recall, at that time, the discussion was, well, Prairie Island puts on their concerts, and they, want to contract and hire officers to come in, they pay reimbursement back to the communities. And we didn't do that, and specifically, I said, should we receive those requests, I'll bring it to council. So I wasn't comfortable in responding to the sheriff without bringing it to this body. What he's requesting would be they would reimburse the cities for any overtime costs associated with staffing personnel to that. So while the agenda had already been put together, I did want to bring this to you because it sort of has a timely aspect, being that the fair gets underway August 8th. And if this is something that you would want to extend the ability for the officers to work those shifts with the fair, I can let the sheriff know. If it's not, that's fine. I'll let the sheriff know that as well.
So Goodhue County would cover the
We
expense?
would invoice Goodhue County for our costs of sending personnel.
Do we have any officers that would like to pick up the extra hours?
I haven't even put this out to the officers, simply because without the approval from this body, I wasn't comfortable telling them that it was available.
Do you know what the hours request, how much they're, obviously they're short-staffed, but
They're looking for evenings from 5 till 1 a.m. for all 4 nights, or 5 nights of the fair.
any other questions from the council?
Do we have enough staff to?
I would open it up, and it would be the caveat that you don't get the night off here to go work that.
Right, right.
We take care of our business before we would take care of, somebody else's needs.
I think it's a nice gesture if we have the man willing to do it, and if they cover the cost and they want to cover, I have no
I
problem
don't
with
have a
that.
problem with it.
Do we need action or just consensus?
Based on the direction from council the last time, that I would need their approval to do it, I would request action.
Okay. Any other discussion? Everybody feel okay about it? All right. I'd seek a motion to approve our police officers covering shifts at the Goodhue County Fair.
I so move.
Motion from Diane. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Lisa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It carries.
Thank you, council. That's all I had.
Shelley, anything you'd like to add?
Nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank
Council.
you. Neil? All right. Sarah? All right.
All right, I know, I do. I just wanted to let you know that I know a while back there was discussion about the getting the minutes and agendas on the city website, and that has happened. So boards and commission agendas and minutes are out there. The minutes are out there if they're approved first. So we won't put them out there unless they're approved. So you can find it under the calendar, and then you can go back to the date of the meeting and just click on that meeting that you're looking for, and it should show up agenda, and then below that, the minutes. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good job. Thanks, Sarah.
Council, we'll start with Laura.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm good, thank you.
All right. Lisa?
I had a community member tell me that I don't ask enough questions. So if I get my information and I read it and I feel like I understand the material, I probably won't ask questions. But if any community members do have questions, please come talk to me. I will ask for you, or I will explain if I understand. But by all means, that's why we're up here, is to be representatives for the city. So ask away, y'all.
Yeah.
That's it.
Ryan?
No.
All right. Derek?
No.
Diane?
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
It wasn't just me. I do have to clarify that. I know Laura had a hand in it, and Ellen did too. So it was a teamwork, a team effort.
Wonderful.
Great. I don't really have anything. If you're going to be around, enjoy the Cannon car, the cruisers. A lot of cool cars. That's a fun night. Hope for good weather. Tonight is National Night Out or Night to Unite. Obviously, we're here at the meeting, but I hope that citizens have got a chance to get together and get to know their neighbors and have a fun night out. I think that's all. So, with all that said, thank you for coming to the early work session. Thank you for your work on the budget. I appreciate it. We've got a little ways to go, but good job. With that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion from Jepson, second from Johnson. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We're adjourned.